Imagine standing in this totally hostile courtroom, right? You're looking directly at the judge who literally holds your life in his hands.
Right, yeah.
And you are facing the death penalty for sabotage. Your lawyers have, prepared this whole defense strategy to save you from the gallows. But instead of pleading for your life, you just push the legal strategy aside.
You just toss it.
Yeah. You stand up in the dock and you use your own trial as a megaphone to put the state itself on trial. You look at the judge and say that your ideal of a free society is one you hope to live for, but, if necessary, it is an ideal for which you are prepared to die.
I mean, it is just the ultimate gamble. You're essentially daring the state to make you a martyr, knowing full well that your death might be the exact spark that burns their entire oppressive system to the ground.
It really is one of the most defining moments of the 20th century. And before we unpack exactly how a man reaches that point of, ultimate conviction, I want to formally welcome you, the listener, to the Bibliophile channel.
Welcome, everyone.
We are diving into something massive today, so please take a second to like this video, drop your ideas in the comments below, and definitely subscribe to the channel so you do not lose the next video. Because today's mission is a comprehensive deep dive into Nelson Mandela's monumental autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom.
And we really want to fully describe this book with all its details. We're not just here to skim the surface or give a Wikipedia summary.
No, definitely not.
We want to extract the precise mechanics of how a leader is actually forged. We are tracing the causal chain of his life, trying to understand the architecture of his decisions. How does a rural herd boy transform into an underground outlaw, and then a prisoner serving a life sentence, and eventually the president of a new nation?
Right. And we're also going to look closely at the crushing personal sacrifices required to actually alter the trajectory of a country.
Exactly. And I should add a quick note here just about our approach, because this source material is steeped in highly charged political history. I mean, it details armed rebellion, communism, deep systemic racism.
Oh, yeah, it covers all of it.
So we need to be clear. We will impartially report the events, the strategies, and the ideologies exactly as Mandela presents them in the book. We aren't endorsing specific viewpoints or, taking sides. We're simply conveying his lived experience so you can fully grasp the historical reality that he navigated.
Spot on. So let's start at the very beginning, because the seeds of his defiance, they are planted really early. He was actually born with the name Rolihlahla.
Yes, which is a great detail.
Right. In Xhosa, that literally translates to pulling the branch of a tree, but the colloquial meaning is troublemaker.
Which is just, it feels almost too perfectly foreshadowed.
It really does. And his early life in the village of Kwanu, it's painted with these incredibly rich sensory details in the book. By the age of 5, he's a herd boy. He talks about stick fighting with the other boys, swimming in cold streams, and drinking warm, sweet milk straight from the cow's udder.
Yeah, he really grounds you in that physical reality.
He does. But the detail that really stood out to me regarding his intellectual development is that in his culture, questions were considered a nuisance. Children learn strictly by observation.
Yeah, and that is a crucial developmental mechanism. By being forced to observe rather than, interrogate adults with questions, he learned to read subtle dynamics.
It's like reading a room.
Exactly. Body language, tone, the unstated flow of power in a room. He became a master observer. But I would say the most formative lesson of his childhood actually comes from his father, who was a traditional chief.
Oh, the magistrate story.
Right. The inciting incident of Mandela's broader awareness of injustice happens when his father is summoned by a white British magistrate over this totally trivial dispute about an ox.
And his father just flat out refuses to go.
He completely refuses. He sends back a message in Xhosa that basically says, "I will not come. I am still girding for battle."
Wow.
Yeah, it is a profound rejection of the magistrate's authority. His father understood that to answer the summons was to validate the colonial power structure over the traditional Thimbu leadership.
Right, like playing their game means admitting they make the rules.
Exactly. And the magistrate responds by unilaterally stripping his father of his chiefdom and all his wealth. So this plants a huge psychological seed in young Mandela. It's this stubborn demand for fairness and an absolute refusal to bow to illegitimate authority, regardless of the cost.
And the cost is immediate, right, because his father eventually dies, the family is left with nothing, and young Mandela is sent away from Kwanu. He is taken in by Chief Jungantaba, who is the acting regent of the Thembu people at the Great Place in Makakaswani.
Quite a change of scenery for him.
Oh, a massive paradigm shift. He goes from rural mud huts to the Great Place. Suddenly he's seeing motor cars, sprawling gardens, men in tailored suits. But beyond the wealth, it's the political structure that captivates him, specifically these tribal meetings.
Yeah, the Great Place operated on this deeply democratic tradition. Mandela would sit silently on the periphery and just observe these massive assemblies.
Putting that observation skill to work.
Exactly. And every person, regardless of their social standing, was allowed to speak their mind without interruption. They would often air these brutal, unvarnished criticisms of the regent himself.
To his face.
Right to his face. And the meeting would continue for hours, sometimes days, until a consensus was reached. The regent's role wasn't to dictate from the beginning, but to listen and only speak at the very end to synthesize the thoughts of the group.
I really want to focus on that dynamic because, Western leadership often romanticizes the decisive visionary who just walks in and tells everyone what to do. This is the exact opposite. It's almost like a modern open source project where everyone contributes before the final code is compiled.
That's a really good way to think about it.
Was this traditional Exosa consensus building the origin of Mandela's famous shepherd analogy?
Oh, it was the absolute foundation of it. Mandela explicitly states in the book that he adopted the regent's philosophy. He says, a leader is like a shepherd. You stay behind the flock, you let the most nimble go out ahead, and the others follow, entirely unaware that they're actually being directed from behind.
It's leadership through synthesis and empowerment rather than, command and control.
Right. But that traditional framework violently collides with the colonial reality as he gets older. So he's sent to British mission schools. And the erasure of his culture basically begins on day one.
Yeah, the renaming incident. His teacher, Miss Mindengane, literally points at him and assigns him the English name Nelson, just arbitrarily.
Just like that.
Because African names were deemed uncivilized by the British curriculum. I mean, it's not just a nickname, it's like a system administrator casually overwriting your user profile without permission, just fundamentally altering your digital identity.
Yeah, cultural erasure is rarely subtle. The British education system he entered operated on the fundamental assumption that European culture was superior and African traditions were just relics.
Right.
But I think the most jarring collision of these two worlds happens when he turned 16 during his circumcision ceremony.
Oh, this part of the book is so intense.
It really is. This is the sacred Exosa, rite of passage into manhood, where he receives the name Dalabunga. It is supposed to be the proudest day of his life.
Right, they're celebrating, but the mood is just entirely shattered by Chief Milikili, who gets up to give a speech.
Yeah, the chief delivers this devastating reality check. He looks at these young men, painted in white clay, ready to claim their inheritance, and he tells them the entire ceremony is a farce.
He holds nothing back.
Nothing. He says, they are promising you manhood, but it is an illusion, because we are a conquered people.
Yeah.
He says they cannot be true men when they are slaves in their own country, reduced to tenants on their own soil.
Just brutal to hear at 16.
Yeah. He tells them their only future is to go to the cities and cough their lungs out, mining the white man's gold. And Mandela admits that, well, while he didn't fully grasp the political dimensions of the speech in that exact moment, the psychological weight of it really darkened his worldview.
And he does begin to grasp that broader political landscape as he moves through Clarkbury, Healdtown, and eventually Fort Hare University. He starts shedding that isolated Thembu identity. He makes his first Sotho-speaking friend. He learns about other African cultures.
The world gets much bigger.
It does. But his time at Fort Hare ends really abruptly, and it highlights that exact stubbornness he inherited from his father. He gets elected to the Student Representative Council, but the students are actually boycotting the election because the council has no actual power and the administration is treating them terribly. So Mandela sides with the boycott.
And the university principal gives him a very simple ultimatum. He says, back down, accept your seat on the council, or you will be expelled.
And he chooses expulsion.
He refuses to participate in a sham democratic process. He'd rather leave.
And as if that isn't enough upheaval, he returns home only to find that the regent has arranged a marriage for him. He is suddenly facing a life that is entirely scripted by others, a scripted royal path, a scripted marriage. So what does he do? He runs away to Johannesburg.
Yeah, he just bails. And he arrives in Johannesburg believing his university education is going to be this protective shield. He really thought a BA degree was a passport to prestige and wealth.
Let me explore that assumption, though, because when he gets to Joburg, he meets Walter Sisulu, who is running a real estate office and is this highly respected community leader. And Mandela is shocked to discover that Sisulu only has a middle school education.
Right, it totally throws him.
So, did Mandela's elite mission school education actually act as a liability at first? Did it blind him to the street-level realities of apartheid?
It absolutely did. He had to actively unlearn the elitism that was instilled in him at Fort Hare. Johannesburg stripped away his academic arrogance pretty quickly. He realized that surviving the street-level brutality of apartheid required practical resilience and political street smarts, which, Sisulu had in absolute abundance.
Yeah, Sisulu was the real deal.
He was, and Sisulu saw Mandela's natural charisma and potential, and he actually helped him secure an articled clerk position at a Jewish law firm, Witkin, Sidelsky, and Eidelman.
Which is an incredible anomaly for the time.
Totally. I mean, Mandela was the only African law student at Wits University. And eventually, he and Oliver Tambo opened their own law practice, which was the first black legal practice in the country.
But the daily reality of practicing law under apartheid is still just humiliating.
Yeah. Even as respected professionals, they are forced to use separate entrances, they are talked down to by white clerks, and they are constantly reminded that the very law they are practicing is literally designed to oppress them.
And this daily friction really sparks his ideological evolution. And it is a complex transition. Because early in his political awakening, Mandela is a very rigid African nationalist. I mean, he actually used to attend Communist Party meetings specifically to disrupt them, right?
Yeah, he would capture the microphone and tear down their signs.
Yeah, he fully believed the liberation struggle should be fought exclusively by black Africans without any white or European ideological influence whatsoever.
But the mechanics of the struggle force him to adapt. He starts engaging in these intense late-night debates with figures like Moses Kotane, who is a self-taught communist leader. And Kotane logically breaks down Mandela's resistance. He points out that the apartheid state doesn't differentiate between a nationalist and a communist. It crushes anyone who challenges white supremacy.
So the alliance is basically born out of tactical necessity.
Partially tactical, yes, but also philosophical. Because Mandela begins to read Marx. And he sees a really compelling parallel. He doesn't adopt strict Soviet dogma, but he recognizes that the Marxist concept of a classless society actually mirrors traditional African communal living, where land and wealth were shared by the tribe, not, hoarded by individuals.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. He realizes that dismantling apartheid requires a multiracial, cross-ideological united front. And this is the moment he stops chasing personal wealth as a lawyer and fully dedicates his life to the African National Congress.
Which brings us to a really difficult turning point in the text. Mandela is a lawyer. He has a deep-stated reverence for the British parliamentary system and the rule of law. So how does a man with that specific legal reverence justify taking up arms? How does he make the leap from nonviolent protests to forming a guerrilla army?
The book traces this not as some sudden radicalization, but as a cold, logical conclusion based on how the state was reacting. Throughout the 1950s, the ANC relies entirely on nonviolence.
Yeah.
The Defiance Campaign, strikes, past burnings.
Right.
But the nationalist government's response is increasingly lethal. And the ultimate turning point is the Sharpeville Massacre in 1960, where police gunned down 69 unarmed black protesters. The government then bans the ANC entirely.
They just shut down every legal route.
Exactly. Mandela writes that it is the oppressor, not the oppressed, who dictates the nature of the struggle. When the state closes every single legal and peaceful avenue for change and meets nonviolence with massacres, peaceful protest literally becomes suicidal.
So he takes the ANC underground. He becomes the Black Pimpernel, evading police while wearing all these various disguises.
Yes, and he forms Umkhonto we Sizwe, or MK, which is the armed wing of the ANC. And he has to build a military apparatus from scratch. He secretly travels across the continent and to London. He studies the writings of Clausewitz and Che Guevara. He secures funding from sympathetic African nations, and he arranges military training for his recruits in places like Ethiopia and Algeria.
He completely transitions from a lawyer to a military commander.
He really does.
But the underground life doesn't last. He is captured, leading to the Rivonia trial in 1963. And this brings us right back to that courtroom scene we started with. He is facing the death penalty. But he refuses to testify in his own defense in a traditional way. He chooses to make a statement from the dock.
Because he recognized that participating in the normal legal back and forth would somehow legitimize a court that he viewed as fundamentally illegitimate.
Right, playing their game again.
Exactly. He used the doc to speak directly to the international community. He outlined the history of the ANC, the economic strangulation of his people, and the moral necessity of their sabotage, and he concluded with that famous line, cementing his willingness to die for a democratic society.
He does avoid the gallows, but he is sentenced to life imprisonment, and he is shipped to Robben Island. Now, if the courtroom was a stage, Robben Island was designed to be a tomb. The conditions he describes in the book are engineered to break the human spirit entirely.
Absolutely brutal.
They are forced to break rocks in this blinding white lime quarry. They are kept in solitary confinement, and the guards utilize constant psychological warfare. There is that chilling interaction with a commanding officer, Colonel Ocamp, who casually tells Mandela, "You are going to sleep for a long, long time," which was a psychological taunt referencing the hanging they had all just narrowly escaped.
Yeah, the state's goal was total dehumanization. They stripped them of their names, replacing them with numbers. They restricted their food, their clothing, and their access to the outside world. But Mandela and the other political prisoners realized that if they allowed their minds to atrophy, the state would win.
I often hear Robben Island referred to as the university. But mechanically speaking, how do you maintain an academic environment when you are doing backbreaking manual labor all day, shivering in thin clothes, and constantly monitored by hostile guards?
You weaponize the only thing they can't take away, which is your collective knowledge. The older leaders established what they called Syllabus A. It was an invisible curriculum. Walter Cicero, who had an encyclopedic memory, taught the history of the ANC. Mek Maharaj taught political theory and Marxism. Ahmed Kathrada taught the history of the Indian struggle in South Africa.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they would literally lecture to each other in low voices while swinging pickaxes in the quarry. They also managed to study for external university degrees, navigating this absurdly strict censorship regime.
Oh, the censorship details in the book are almost surreal. Like Mandela requests a textbook on torts, T-O-R-T-S, the legal concept, right?
Yeah.
And the prison censor denies it because he thought Mandela was asking for a book on torches, assuming it was a manual for building explosives.
It just perfectly illustrates the paranoid ignorance of the prison administration. But the most incredible academic achievement of his imprisonment actually directly relates to the deep dive we are doing today. Because the very autobiography we are discussing was secretly drafted inside his cell.
The logistics of creating this book are just staggering. He wrote the initial draft late at night over the course of 4 months, and then he would secretly pass the loose pages to Walter Sisulu and Ahmed Kathrada, who would review the text and add their own historical corrections and insights in the margins. It was a completely communal effort.
Yeah, it wasn't just his memory, it was their collective memory.
Exactly. And then Mek Maharaj transcribed the entire manuscript into this microscopic handwriting, hiding the tiny pages inside the bindings of study books, just to smuggle them out when he was released.
It was a massive operational risk. Writing the manuscript was an act of defiance, preserving the truth of their struggle against a state that wanted them entirely forgotten. And as the years turned into decades on Robben Island and later Pollsmoor Prison, the political calculus outside began to shift. The 1976 Soweto uprising, led by school children, ignited internal chaos, and the international community finally began imposing severe sanctions.
The apartheid government was basically bleeding capital and losing control. The state feels the pressure so acutely that they attempt to offer Mandela conditional release 6 separate times.
Yeah, they offer him his freedom, but always with strings attached, like renouncing violence or agreeing to be banished to one of the nominally independent rural homelands. And he rejects every single offer.
He refuses to compromise.
Right. He famously responds through a statement read by his daughter, saying, "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Prisoners cannot enter into contracts."
He essentially uses his captivity as leverage. He initiates secret negotiations with the government, and he does this without telling his ANC comrades at first, knowing they might reject the idea of talking to the enemy. He has to slowly maneuver the government ministers into realizing that a democratic transition is their only alternative to a total racial civil war.
He really shepherds them to that conclusion.
Right back to the shepherd analogy. Finally, the state capitulates. On February 11th, 1990, after 27 years of imprisonment, he walks out of Victor Verster prison. And there is a small passing detail in the book that speaks volumes about the isolation he endured. When he walks through the gates, a journalist thrusts a fuzzy microphone toward his face, and Mandela physically recoils.
Yeah, he thought it was a new type of weapon.
He had been severed from the world for almost 3 decades.
It's heartbreaking. And while the release was a global triumph, Mandela is deeply candid in the final chapters about the devastating personal cost of his journey. He introduces this concept of the twin obligations. He writes that every person has an obligation to their family, their parents, their spouse, their children, and a separate obligation to their community and their country.
But he realizes that in South Africa, under the mechanics of apartheid, a black man could not fulfill both. In choosing to liberate his people, he was forced to abandon his role as a husband to his first wife, Evelyn, and later to Winnie, and he was largely absent from the lives of his children.
Yeah.
He describes this not as a heroic sacrifice, but as a tragic, heavy failure. He writes that he simply could not be the father his family needed while fighting a war for his nation.
It is a profound, melancholic admission that really grounds the entire book. He didn't just sacrifice years of his life, he sacrificed the fundamental human experience of raising his family. And this immense personal loss feeds directly into the ultimate thesis of the text. Mandela concludes that freedom is indivisible.
Indivisible.
Yes. He writes that the chains on any one of his people were the chains on all of them, and the chains on all of his people were the chains on him. But more radically, he asserts that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred, locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness.
The oppressed and the oppressor are both robbed of their humanity. It forces you to look at the entire trajectory from the stubborn boy in Kwanu to the president of a democratic South Africa, not just as a historical timeline, but as a manual for holding on to your humanity in the face of a system designed to destroy it.
It really is the anatomy of endurance.
That is about all the time we have for this deep dive. Again, if you enjoyed this analysis, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit subscribe to support the Bibliophile channel so we can keep bringing you these explorations. Do not forget to subscribe so you don't lose the next video.
Before we go, I do want to leave you with a final thought drawn directly from the last pages of the book. Mandela reflects that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. He recognized that ending apartheid was just the removal of a barrier. The actual work of building a free society was the next, steeper hill.
Wow.
So think about your own life or the challenges of our current generation. If the freedom to simply be free was Mandela's great hill, what is the hill that we are currently climbing without even realizing it? Where in your own endeavors are you confusing the removal of an obstacle with the actual completion of the journey?
A question we all absolutely need to ask ourselves. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Bibliophile channel.